What would happen if I told you that Lewis Hamilton's poor performance in the Azerbaijan GP was not the pilot's fault, but of his own team? An engineer leaked such an uncomfortable truth that he now speaks openly of sabotage within Ferrari. Is this the beginning of the end of Hamilton's red sleep? During the classification session, Hamilton was eliminated in Q2. The fact was already striking on its own. It is not common to see the worldwide heptacampion outside the top 10, but the truly strange was the contrast between his sensation behind the wheel and what the data showed. While the pilot transmitted radio frustration messages, ensuring that he could not control the rear of the car, the engineers in the factory began to detect something that did not square. It was not a simple configuration error. What arose from telemetry had no precedence. A perfectly stable car without survival or sudden peaks in the load, with ideal aerodynamic behavior, even in rapid transition areas. Technically, the SF25 that Hamilton had piloted that afternoon was the most balanced car that Ferrari had managed to put on track throughout the season. But that fact, far from being good news, ignited all the alarms. The contradiction was absolute. The pilot had felt a nervous, unpredictable, and lacking car, while the data described something almost perfect. That dissonance revealed an awkward truth. There was something hidden in the car settings. And the most disturbing thing is that Hamilton did not know. The disconnection between the pilot and the machine, in a category where the confidence in the car is sacred, became a symptom of something much more serious. A deliberate manipulation, or at least a covert negligence. From that moment on, the atmosphere in the paddock changed. What at first was a low performance now seemed a possible internal betrayal. The rumors began to multiply, fed by a phrase that Hamilton released by radio in full classification, apparently desperate: "I am fighting with the rear. Any advice? Please give me a hand." Said with the urgency of who knows the drift, that public plea revealed something deeper than a badly adjusted car. It was the voice of a pilot who felt they had left him alone. When the lights of the Baku circuit went out and the cars were transferred to the boxes, the most important work was just beginning. Not on the track but in data laboratories. What Ferrari engineers found when analyzing the telemetry of Hamilton's car was not only unusual, it was deeply disturbing. The data did not lie, and what they reflected was impossible to ignore. The SF25 that Hamilton had conducted in classification behaved as if it were perfectly balanced. He did not present anomalous peaks, nor signs of instability, nor unexpected degradation. The car, at least in numbers, was impeccable. On the surface this might seem good news. But within a Formula One team, when the pilot complains about critical problems and the data shows perfection, there is something that does not fit. And in an environment as controlled as Ferrari, where each parameter is documented, any deviation implies that someone at some point altered the variables without informing. What came later was an internal audit of the car configuration system. Line by line, parameter per parameter, the technicians began to compare the real data of the SF25 with the configurations officially authorized by the Hamilton race team. And that's when the truth came to light. Specific modifications had been made in two key areas. First, in the rear conduction height, a vital component that determines the relationship between aerodynamic load and tip speed. Second, in the preload of the differential, which directly affects the transfer of power to the rear wheels during curve acceleration. Both changes are extremely delicate. Badly tight, they can turn a competitive car into an unpredictable disaster. But the most shocking was not the technical content of alterations, but the origin. None of these modifications had been approved by Frédéric Vasseur or by engineers who worked directly with Hamilton. Instead, the records pointed to an internal entity with independent operational power, the so-called Central Performance Group. This technical cell within Ferrari, composed of simulation and development specialists, has the mission of finding experimental improvements to gain marginal performance. But in this case, they transferred a sacred line. They implemented direct changes in the race car of one of their pilots without formal authorization or prior communication. They did it behind the pilot. And the worst, they did it in classification, the most critical moment of the weekend, where any deviation can be the difference between success and ridicule. For a pilot like Hamilton, accustomed to the operational rigor of Mercedes, this type of carelessness is more than a lack of professionalism. It is a technical betrayal. Because in Formula One, when a car is given to you, that car should be an extension of your body. Not a black box with installed secrets. Not a clandestine experiment under pressure. The inevitable question arises: was this a simple logistic error within an overloaded system? Or was it a premeditated action, designed to sabotage the pilot's performance at a key moment? The presence of this group acting outside the normal communication channels suggests that Ferrari is operating with fragmented internal structures, with agendas that may not be aligned. And when within a Formula One team the interests are not aligned, the direct consequence is chaos. But in this case, that chaos had a name and surname: Lewis Hamilton. Trust is the most fragile asset in Formula One. It is built with data, with transparent communication, with years of shared work between engineers and pilots, and can disappear in a single classification session. In Baku, that was exactly what happened between Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari. A spoiler was not broken. A strategy did not fail. Something more important was broken: the belief that everyone in the team worked in the same direction. When Hamilton launched his desperate message on the radio, "I am fighting with the rear. Any advice? Please give me a hand," was not just a tactical request. It was an emotional confession. That phrase, thrown into the air with the rawness of those who find no answers in their surroundings, was the most obvious manifestation of an invisible fracture that was already beginning to open inside Ferrari. A fracture that, until that time, had been contained by the illusion that the 2025 project would work as a perfect machinery. But Hamilton, with more than 300 races behind him, knew something did not square. The instincts of a pilot of his caliber are refined for years of competition to the limit. If the car does not respond, it does not do so by subjective perception. He does it because there is something out of place. This loss of technical confidence quickly becomes an internal credibility crisis, and that in Ferrari has deep implications. For Hamilton, who left Mercedes in search of a last great conquest, this was a devastating blow. He had opted for the Scuderia, for his history, for the possibility of entering the books as the man who returned Ferrari to the top. But in his third race, he is already doubting whether everyone within the team shares that same goal. Because when a pilot feels that his car has been modified without his consent, the problem is no longer the performance. It is betrayal. In Maranello, the technical discovery detonated a chain of reactions. The engineers responsible for Hamilton's direct environment began to publicly distance themselves from the group that implemented the changes. The career analysis team, which monitors the evolution of each session, was also surprised by the intervention of this central performance group, which in theory should only test simulator, not intervene directly on Grand Prize weekends. The lack of communication between departments was exposed, and what was promised as a cohesive project began to show seams. Internally, the tension shot. Post-carrier meetings were tense, even chaotic. It was not about understanding what had failed, but to discover who authorized the modifications, why they hid, and if there was a parallel agenda. Was it a test without warning? Was it a negligence? Or was it more dark, a way to limit Hamilton's media impact after his strong start in China? Meanwhile, Charles Leclerc remained silent. His performance had not been extraordinary, but stable. And for some within the team, that stability represented the continuity of the project. Instead, Hamilton symbolized change, disruption, media attention. In a team as historically hierarchical as Ferrari, those forces do not always live well. And when the suspicion arises that certain sectors could be favoring a pilot on another, the environment is rapidly contaminated. What happened in Baku was more than a technical incident. It was a warning. A sample that, in Ferrari, there are still parallel structures, fragmented interests and internal dynamics that can even crush even the largest talents. And now, with a Lewis Hamilton injured in the depths of his trust, Ferrari's great 2025 project hangs from a thread. When one of those pillars cracks, the entire building trembles. For Ferrari, the challenge is even greater. It is not enough to identify those responsible. They must redefine internal authority lines, reestablish the protocols, and most importantly, send a clear message to their two pilots, to the engineers and the world, that this team has only one direction. Otherwise, the story will be repeated. Because if something has demonstrated the past is that Ferrari, when divided, does not compete, only survives. This scandal is not an end. It is a turning point. Ferrari's future in 2025 will depend on how he responds to this challenge. And that response will not be measured in official communications or in promises of review. It will be measured on the track. At the time Hamilton sits on SF25 and decide if you can trust again. Not in the car. In the team that is supposed to take care of it. If Ferrari does not transform this crisis into a structural and cultural purge, it will not matter how fast your car is, nor how brilliant is the talent of your pilots. Because without trust there is no team. And without a team there is no championship. Was it really sabotage? Or simply a chain of errors that ended with the most successful pilot in history trapped in a system that still does not understand? That's why I want to know your opinion. Do you think this was a sabotage orchestrated from within to stop Hamilton? Or do you think it was a sign of chronic disorganization, one more symptom of Ferrari's old evils? Can Lewis recover confidence in this team? Leave me your analysis in the comments.